Johnson was fun today. Good morning, people again from Pipers'Persuasion. It's Wednesday and it's the 30th of March and it's 2011. I've got all that right. And it's raining outside the National Piping Centre where we're having today's big interview with the principal of the National Piping Centre, Roddy MacLeod MBE. And Roddy has got a very illustrious history in piping, still a young man, a lot younger than me, but a so varied contribution to make to Pipers'Persuasion that we thought we'd get him anyway because he has a big background in his history. He's going to speak about Duncan Johnston, who's very important, and Duncan hasn't been covered. He has the background in teaching. He has won all the major prizes. He's been pipe major of a grade 1 prize winning band and another wee innovation that we'll talk about, the Spirit of Scotland. And most of all, he has the National Piping Centre here, and we'll discuss that finally when we get to it, what we're doing with teaching youngsters in the world of piping. So, much ground to cover, and I hope again that you enjoy this today. Thank you. It works very well with Okay, Roddy, thanks very much for being interviewed today for Pipers'Persuasion, giving us your very valuable time. I know you're busy, quite an organisation here in the National Piping Centre where we're situated, and but before we get, I'm going to drag you back quite a few years. Young man, where did you learn your piping? Who taught you?
Well, really, me starting in piping is due to my family background. My parents are both from a sort of Highland background. My father's side of the family is from Lewis, and my mother is from Benbecula.
Yeah.
And so there was always an interest in the house of Gaelic music or Highland music, and my father was keen on the bagpipes, as was my mother actually.
Did they play?
My father had a bash at it.
Okay.
And I can remember him having a shot at the pipes, but he was quite keen for us to learn. I've got two older brothers and I have an older sister as well.
And did they play?
And my two older brothers went for lessons. My sister went down the Highland dancing route. So when I was about 5 or 6 years old, I used to go along to the house of the man who was teaching them. He was a guy called Willie Campbell from Skye. So I just have sort of early memories of sitting with a glass of orange juice and a bit of sponge cake, watching them getting their chanter lessons.
Whereabouts was that?
That was in Cumbernauld.
In Cumbernauld,
So they kept it up for a while. My oldest brother, longer than my next oldest brother, and Callum, my oldest brother, I think if he'd stuck at it, would have been a very good piper. I keep telling him that. And occasionally he'll pick the chanter up, even now, whenever he sees one lying about, and just try to play a little bit. But what that did for me was I could play by ear from listening to them a little bit. So I had, the scale and some probably basic embellishments, and probably make an attempt at a tune.
Right.
So it wasn't until maybe I was about 10 or 11 years old that I kind of got into it again. My father had been involved with the starting actually of the Cumbernauld Caledonia pipe band as it was at the time.
Okay.
And when he was involved, the great Gaelic bard, singer, piper Norman MacLeod was actually the pipe major of the band.
Was he?
And
character Norman.
But Norman had left by the time I went up for sort of my early lessons, and so yeah, so that's kind of you know, the early part of my piping. Then the family moved to Glasgow, and when we moved into Glasgow at that time, through some boys who were in the school I went to, they were going to the College of Piping. And so I ended up going along to the College of Piping.
Right.
And that is where I was introduced to Duncan Johnston.
As Duncan, he was at the College of Piping at that time.
Duncan was teaching. And I actually had a number of teachers at the College of Piping. And so I had Angus McClellan for some time.
Okay.
I had Duncan McFadden for some lessons.
Right.
I actually had one or two classes I can remember with Seamus McNeill as well. But for the most part, the time I had at the college, the greater part was with Duncan Johnston.
Yes.
And then there came a point in time when Duncan left the College of Piping and he actually set up his own piping school.
That was in Robertson Street.
In Robertson Street in
Yeah.
Glasgow. And at that time, I'd probably reached the age of about 17 or 18.
Right.
And I was a student at university. And whenever I would have spare time from classes and whatnot, I would go down to Robertson Street and spend a bit of time getting lessons from Duncan, and he would utilise me to do things like tie in bags and things like that. So I kind of learned some of these useful skills at that time as well. And then, you know, sometime later the school in Robertson Street closed down, but Duncan continued to teach from his house, and so he had a house at that point in Priest Hill.
That was in Priest Hill, yes, I know it well.
And, so he used to go up there, and you know, after a little while again, then he moved over to his house in the Shawlands area of Glasgow.
Yes.
And I went there for quite a while.
So it's quite a few years we went to Duncan, eh?
Yeah, well, I was going for a lot of years actually. I suppose from about the age of 11 or 12 maybe. Right through until, you know, after I'd won the gold medal. So, you know, probably up until, I guess I'd be about 30 really, when things weren't as regular, if you like, like Duncan, you know.
Did you get all your paperwork from Duncan?
Yeah, pretty much. I had a couple of previous very good lessons from Angus McClellan. I remember in particular Angus teaching me the King's Taxes. Right. Which I was getting ready to play at the Silver Chanter. So certainly like to give credit to Angus for his.
I was a good teacher,
Angus. It was great, and you know, there was times that Duncan, you know, over the years he didn't keep too high that. Duncan had angina and a bit of a heart problem. And so there was breaks, and you know, when I would be maybe spending time, you know, with the other teachers I mentioned at the college.
Yes.
You know, I suppose over the piece you would have to say, by quite some way, I'd spent.
That was your principal teacher.
Duncan. Yeah. And he did. I mean,
where did Duncan get stuff from?
I think he had a range of people. I think Duncan was taught by an Angus Campbell from Bannachulish. Okay. And that goes back to the John McCall lineage, if you like, in piping. In piping, yeah. And he used to spend time a lot in the time of the company of Donald MacLeod and Roddy MacLeod from South Uist. Yes. And so he picked up, but also Duncan, I remember very clearly him teaching the tune Craigellachie. It's a big tune. Right. And he got that from Bob Brown. Right. And Bob Brown had come to Glasgow and conducted some classes in a number of tunes. And I just always remember putting on a tape with Bob Brown
Aye.
and just being amazed at just how it was just exactly the way Duncan is.
So it was very faithful then.
He was very,
Yeah,
I think Duncan was probably an excellent student, you know, and
Aye.
he was, well, he wasn't famed as a Pembroke player. I would have said he was an
Aye.
excellent Pembroke teacher.
He didn't like competing,
No, he wasn't comfortable competing.
no.
And
But he was marvellous in that recital, wasn't he?
it was tremendous. I mean, I think, well, he was known as the king of the jigs, Duncan.
Well, I was there actually the night that he won the knockout competition.
Yeah,
The first knockout competition against Donald MacLeod.
that's right.
And that was in the old Highlanders Institute.
Yeah,
And I would say the later Highlanders Institute, because it was in Berkeley Street and it has quite a small room up the stairs. And he went on that night, wonderful bagpipe, and put on some exhibition, as did Donald, of course, the two of them, you know, and it was nip and tuck. And it was maybe the women's vote that got Duncan a thing.
Well, right.
But obviously Donald was the big name, but Duncan just blew them away, you know.
Yeah. Well, he was a fantastic player and a great entertainer, and
Yeah.
I think what's nice is that, you know, Donald MacLeod held him in such high regard, and
Yeah.
well, they both had such a great mutual respect for each other, you know. So, but Duncan, the thing that I think about him was his technique. When I think about his technique, and I've talked to other people who were his students, and you know, just being at lessons with him, and I don't know if I can ever remember him missing a grace note out of anything, you know. And it was so perfectly clear.
Aye.
You know, Duncan was a character, you know. I wouldn't like to say he was by no means
I
perfect.
never ever heard anybody playing Cameronian rant
Oh,
like
Cameron
we-
Grant and Charlie's Welcome.
Oh, I kept a recording from Pipeline or something. Seamus McNeill had been interviewing in the famous interview,
Yes.
where funny things were said about Seamus's pipe and all the rest of it, but that's another story. But the main thing about that was, at the end of all the banter, Duncan had actually, in this live programme, just put the pipes up and played, I forget what the march was, but they played the Cameron Grant Charlie's Welcome. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful.
I can remember
They
that.
brought the music out as well.
Yeah, yeah. He was a very musical player. He did have his own distinctive style.
Yeah.
I would say it was a rounder style.
Aye.
You know, a West Coast style, but
Yeah.
a round style. But an open style, very, very musical. And so I was very fortunate to have Duncan as a teacher.
See, how did he teach you? Was he in your face? Or, I couldn't imagine him being passive.
No, I certainly wasn't passive. I can remember initially being quite frightened of him.
Aye.
Because I was quite young,
Aye.
and I suppose you're a bit in awe and whatnot, and they used to sort of stand up and sing, and they hit the table, and when you're quite wee or young, I suppose
Aye.
it's a bit daunting.
Aye.
But as I got older and he grew to sort of understand him, and there was a great deal of humour in the way Duncan
Of course.
was.
Aye.
And I think that was quite inspiring, was that he, as well as going through your tunes and the music, he would always have some great tales and stories to tell you.
Aye. Very kind person.
Very kind. And just a good ton of humour. And if you're going for your lessons, you get a good laugh.
Oh, of course.
You want to go back.
It's a motivation, isn't it?
And you want to please your teacher and see what
Aye.
they had to say. So he had lots of pupils, Duncan, going to him.
Aye.
And that's here in the centre we've got
And his compositions, which leads on to his, you mentioned the Duncan Johnston Memorial competition, which was just on Saturday there.
Yeah.
Very, very big entry, and B's and C's and all the rest of it, and marvellous competition, but all inspired because of his compositions as well, really, yeah?
Yeah, well, that's right, lots of tunes, Duncan, and across the full range of the repertoire, slow airs, marches, disparials, hornpipes, jigs.
Aye.
And some of them were quite ahead of their time, you know, tunes like the Streaker, I remember being taken up by the pipe bands, you know, it was cutting edge sort of hornpipes at the time, and a lot of the jigs are still fantastic tunes. And of course he wrote some great Pipers'Persuasion, and the one that I think maybe his best Pipers'Persuasion was for his son Alan, who died of leukemia when he was 20, and he wrote Lament for Alan, my son. And that's now Duncan's own family, Duncan's own sons Neil and you know, his Duncan, and they're tremendous musicians. They play cello and viola. And Neil wrote a whole suite for orchestra, and it was using lots of Duncan's compositions with the underlying theme of that Pipers'Persuasion, Lament for Alan, my son. So that was a fantastic piece. I mean, it was performed at the Duncan Johnston competition last year.
Yes.
It's now, this year in July, is going on tour around the islands, and
they're going to perform it there.
Performing throughout all the islands and finishing up at the Head Kilt Festival. So that's been great. And obviously for me, starting the Duncan Johnston Memorial Piping Competition was a big thing. I mean, we started that the year after Duncan died. Duncan died in November '99, and so at that time, you know, I wanted to do something for him to be remembered by. And I was quite fortunate that Colin McClellan was working at the Piping Centre at that time, and he was also president of the CPA. And Colin was had spent time with Duncan in his younger years as well, and so we agreed that we would try and create this collaborative effort for the Piping Centre and the competing pipers to put on the competition. And part of that, for the jig, made it a condition the players had to play some of the tunes published in Duncan's collections, and the idea was that would make them look at Duncan's music. And it's been very successful.
I think so.
It's gone from strength to strength. So, last week was the 12th competition, I think, perhaps 2000 to 2011 inclusive.
But it was very well attended.
It was.
Good audience and a big entry in every event, really.
And it's quite international now as well. Pipers from Scotland, Ireland, Brittany, New Zealand, you know, Canada. So it's great to see the spread of it. It's fantastic.
So that's Duncan Johnston. You skimmed over very nicely, but I'm going to drag you back again. Solo piping in your youth, prizes, competitions, what happened there? When did you start competing?
I probably started competing around about the age of 12 or 13.
Okay.
And I suppose it took me about a year to start getting into the prizes, and I can remember my big sort of breakthrough was I won a competition at Glasgow Academy, which was run by the Glasgow Highland Club. And that was judged by Donald MacLeod. And I remember being petrified playing in front of Donald MacLeod, because he had been, you know, my father had always referred to Donald MacLeod as being, you know, the greatest piper of his generation, and the Lewis connection, I suppose, was
of
one
course.
that
Very strong, yes.
Dear to my father's thoughts, I guess. And so to, you know, get that prize was maybe the start of it for me, and I kind of, you know, entered myself into lots of junior competitions, and probably had reasonable success. So the success became better and better as I kind of got up in my teens, really, you know, until, you know, I was doing pretty well by the time I got to 17 or whatever.
So were you still playing amateur, or did you, when did you go the Open?
I went, as soon as I turned 18,
that
was a kind of done thing, I think, at the time. So when you became 18, you went into the Open.
Because you ran out of competitions really at that point.
Well, that's it. I mean, you just want to, I suppose, pick up all the experience you can in the junior level, And then at that time in the open was open.
Yes.
It wasn't graded, you know,
Aye.
as it is now. So you were straight into competing against
The
Donald
top name.
McPherson and
Aye.
Angus MacDonald and Gavin Stoddart and Ian Morrison and whoever I could list.
Aye.
Ian McFadget, I could go on, and
Aye. Oh,
guys who you just held in up as the piping gods, you were pitched in against them from the word go, you know.
So, first prize in the open?
In the open.
Aye.
My big breakthrough in the open, I think I might have been about 20 years old, and then, I won the Peabrook and the overall, actually, the Edinburgh Police piping competition.
Yeah.
And they used to have a 2-day competition there, and I remember going to that. In fact, it was the first competition actually my wife Margaret ever came to with me, so it was quite sort of significant from that point of view. I always remember she sat in and listened to the Pipers'Persuasion, which was a brave effort for her. And at the end of it, I said, what did you think? And she said, well, I thought you'd played well. She said, and there was a wee man there, I thought he was really good as well. So that turned out to be Ian Morrison she was talking about.
Aye, well,
and,
good
like
taste,
a hero of mine.
Aye.
And I think, so at the end of the day, there was a number of the big names in the competition, but I won the Pipers'Persuasion that day, and a few other prizes. I ended up winning the overall. So that was a kind of real major breakthrough for me at that Edinburgh Police competition. So that must have been around about 82 or 83 or thereabouts.
Right. We might as well just go on then to discuss the gold medal at Northern Meeting 1986. So you won in 1986 the gold medal. How many attempts did you have at that?
How many attempts?
Quite a few before you...
Not too many,
No.
because I was 24 years old when I won the gold medal in Inverness.
Right.
And probably reckon I made 3 or 4 attempts at that. You know, I'd actually got seconded. The silver medal, I think, was a relatively new thing at that time. Played in that probably when I was about 18 or 19.
Right.
And I got second in it.
Right.
I remember it was second to Amy Garson, as she is now. She's a pupil of Jimmy Macintoshes. And then, so probably I'd been 19 or 20 years old when I first played in the gold medal in Inverness, and then
you won it at 24.
24.
Do you remember the tune?
Played the tune Lament for Finlay. And
you remember any surrounding circumstances?
well, I did. I remember, like, you know, 2 of my very good friends were in the prize list. I think Willie McCallum, maybe Ronnie McShannon was second, and Willie was third or something like that. They were both in the prize list. We were great pals, still are.
Aye.
And so the 2 of them were in the prize list. Fortunately, I won it that day. But quite small tunes that year.
Aye.
Those tunes, like the boat tune was set, but Lament for Finlay was the tune I got, you know. So it was a year where they'd set smaller tunes.
And the bagpipe you were playing,
yeah.
What was that? Is that the pipe that you always played, or had you changed it before the gold medal or anything like that? What's the story about that?
The pipes, well, the first bagpipe I played was the one that was actually given to my older brother. And I told you about my older brother who'd gone on to the pipe. And that set of pipes came to our family via a free church minister. And his name was Fergus MacDonald. And being a free church minister, I guess it's maybe not the done thing to be playing bagpipes.
No.
Or maybe he didn't have time, I'm not sure. So that he gave the pipes to our family. And so that was a set of Glen bagpipes.
Glen of Edinburgh.
Yeah, nice set of Glen drones. So that was the pipes I used throughout my sort of early competing years in the juniors. Right. And then, I guess, as I was in my late teens, I noticed there was a crack in the tuning pin of the middle tenor drone,
Okay.
and I gave it into a bagpipe maker to get it repaired. I won't say which bagpipe maker.
No, okay.
The job came back, and the repair, you know, I wasn't really happy with the repair, let's put it that way.
Slightly botched.
And it didn't look the same, and you know, the ivory mounts had been boiled off the drone. And anyway, I just didn't feel the same about the pipes after that, so I went on the lookout for an upgrade, if you like. And my godfather, actually, his name was Roddy MacLeod, he had a lovely set of lorry bagpipes. And I got a loan of them for a wee bit of silver and ivory mounted lorry pipes. And I got a loan of them, and I felt they sort of really brought the chanter more to life. It sort of transformed the sound. It really was.
Big harmonics.
There's bigger harmonics and bigger drone sound.
Yeah.
And the chanter just seemed to kind of really come to life in a way it hadn't before, you know.
What chanter pipe you play?
It's a nail pipe, it's the one I play to this day. So I had it since, you know, 1981 or 82, one of the first nail chanters. So the combination of that lorry drone and the pipe chanter changed the pipes way, you know, for the better. And I wasn't able to get that set of pipes. He was quite keen to keep them for his own son, should he be interested. But finally, John Burgess, actually, who had got wind that I was looking for a set of pipes, let me know that he had a set of lorry bagpipes for sale, exactly the same as my godfather's.
Right.
Identical almost.
Yeah.
And the set of pipes had a great piping history to them. They belonged to an Alexander Mackenzie, who was a nephew of Ronald Mackenzie, and going back to John Van Mackenzie and all part of that piping family. So this set of pipes was a presentation set of pipes that were presented to Alexander Mackenzie when he left the Seaforth Highlanders in 1907.
1907.
So that's when the pipes were made.
Tremendous, eh?
Yeah. And so there's a plaque on the pipes that gives the history.
Yes.
And I don't think the pipes had been played for years. I'm not sure where John acquired the pipes from. But John was a man that would collect pipes and silver dirks and plaid brooches.
All the stuff.
He was famous for that. And I remember going up to meet John at Perth, at the railway station at Perth, and they gave me the pipes away to try out. And you know, after a very quick shot on the pipes, they decided that was a set.
That's it.
So,
of course, it would come with a good recommendation from John, and he would sell you a box.
Well, exactly, and you know, over the course of my life, I became quite good friends with John Burgess.
Yes,
and I was fortunate enough to spend time in his house, and him vice versa. And so I knew John a little bit by then, and I think he took care over that decision. He wasn't going to give me a...
Well, it was his reputation would be at stake as well.
So I've always been very grateful for that. So.
It's wonderful, that, isn't it? And did you play these when you got that first gold medal?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And then you went on in 1988, 2 years later, won at Oban, the Gershall Gathering.
That's right.
What was the tune that day?
I played Beloved Scotland as my tune. And again...
Do you like that tune?
I do like it. It's I've often been unsettled about the right way to play it, because there's so many different ways of putting it across.
That's the emphasis, really, isn't it?
Yeah. It's one of those tunes that can be a hit or miss depending on who's judging me on the day, you know.
Yeah.
So, but
I think you've got to be in the right mood for playing it as well.
But I haven't actually played it very much since, to be quite honest, you know. But on the day it worked out for me, and
it's quite a long tune too, isn't it?
Well, I've played longer, you know. I would say it's a challenging tune.
Yes.
You know, a challenging mid-length to fairly long tune.
So if you're playing that and you're playing it well to win gold medal, you're working hard that day, you know.
Yeah. I think it's a tune that you've got to, play with some commitment. You've got to go for it.
When did you start competing at the Glenfiddich?
I think the first year was 1986 when I won the gold medal in Inverness.
Okay.
I think that was my first year.
And it was well established, that competition, by that time?
It was, very much so.
Aye.
It was, as it is now, it was the pinnacle of your piping career to get to
The
play.
very end of the piping season, and the end of October.
That's right.
Just for those that are not aware of the Glenfiddich. And you've had a lot of input even since, apart from winning at the Glenfiddich. You won 3 times there, I've got, and no doubt other prizes, runners up and stuff like that, but anybody that's winning overall at Glenfiddich is putting up a fantastic performance, because it's all the top pipers that's playing there, both in the Pier candlelight music, so you've achieved it 3 times. Did you have any sort of input in the Spirit of Scotland pipe band?
Yes, the Spirit of Glenfiddich gave some sponsorship to get the band on the go, So.
Tell us briefly how that all came about. Aye.
Right. Well, it was basically, I guess, it became a firm commitment to try and do something at the Glenfiddich Championship.
Right.
Myself and a number of the other competing pipers, some who were there that day that weren't competing. I remember, it actually stems back to an earlier discussion which I had in Italy with Michael Gray from Canada.
Yes.
And just talking about, he was asking, did I miss the pipe band scene? The Scottish Choir Pipe Band, which had been pipe major for a while. And I said, well, I did miss it, but it wasn't really too practical for me to be still in a pipe band with all the commitment that it needed, given my responsibilities here at the piping centre and doing my solo piping. It was just an awful lot to keep going. But I remember saying to him, I did miss the thrill of playing at the World Championships and that kind of thing. And then I think that where that was very first mooted was, wouldn't it be great, get a good collection of good players and just turn out.
Aye.
So that was where the very first conversation was.
Aye.
And then I relayed that conversation about a month later at the Glenfiddich to the guys in the bar who were standing having a drink at the end of the competition.
Aye.
And it was met with quite a lot of enthusiasm.
Aye.
And there's people like Willie McCallum, Angus McCall, Colin McClellan, Jenny Hazard, Ian Spears,
Alistair Gillis.
I can't remember if Alistair was there at that point or not, but actually at the Glenfiddich that year, there was enough of a genuine spark of interest to try and take it forward. So between the people that were there, put the feelers out for other pipers that we thought might be of a similar calibre that could potentially do the job, really. Very little practice. Come together as a credible group. And it was about asking people who weren't actually playing with pipe bands, who weren't taking people away from other bands. So it kind of came together really quickly in terms of the personnel for the band. And then the next process was to pick the music, circulate it via the internet and MP3 recordings. And then we managed to pull together a few practices with the Scottish guys, maybe about 4 or 5, and then the first actual practice with what you would call a pipe band was 6 days before the World Pipe Band Championship.
6 days before the World Pipe Band.
The first practice that everybody was at was the night before. So when we did actually get together on the first serious day of everybody with pipes out, it was quite incredible in some respects, looking back at actually how good it came together. You know,
Aye.
you know, the guys had put in the work.
And what did you do about set chanters?
Sent them out, chanters with a reed in the
Aye.
post. And the guys,
Whose chanters were they?
McCallum's.
Uh-huh.
McCallum's gave a free set of chanters. And that was the other thing that was great about the band, was that there was so many people wanted to get behind it. They
Aye.
liked the idea for whatever reason. I'm sure, as I found out later, there was a number of people who didn't like the idea of it. But that's like,
Can't please everybody, eh?
but most people, I think, did like the
And what about a
idea.
uniform?
We hired them, £25 a man. And that's it. We got a deal from Gaelic Themes.
Aye.
And everybody had a black jacket, a
Uh-huh.
black shirt,
Aye.
you know, gilly brogues.
Aye.
So what we bought the kilt socks, black socks. McCallum's gave us kilt socks, £4 a pair. And we bought them.
Aye.
We bought ties,
Aye.
again similarly quite cheap.
Yeah.
And the Gaelic Themes, they gave us a kilt, sporran, ski and do, and I think that was all we needed.
That's all you needed,
And everybody did their own Glengarries, and
Aye.
we had again badges made up. So
Well, there's a terrific interest in the build-up to this in the general public.
I think
There
so. It's a
was.
bit.
Oh, aye. Everybody was excited to
Yeah,
just go and see you either playing well or fall on your face, you know.
Well, that's right. I mean, it added great interest that year.
So on the
There's no
day,
doubt about that.
may as well continue the story. What happened on the day, the morning you had to qualify?
Well, that was a big. I mean, we weren't going there thinking we were going to win it. That we've always said that, and you know that's a fact. You can't expect to win the World Pipe Band Championships with a week's practice. But
Aye.
what we set as our goal was
Aye.
to qualify for the final,
Uh-huh.
which, as you know, is the top 10 bands in the world.
Yeah.
Maybe 11 or 12, I don't know. But
Aye.
and it's not easy to qualify for the
It
final
is
of the World
not,
Pipe
aye.
Band, particularly with the circumstances we had in front of
As
us.
many a famous band has found out in recent years, taken for
Yeah.
granted going to qualify, and unfortunately it didn't. They travelled thousands of miles, aye.
So we went along and we played well in the qualifying round,
Uh-huh.
and I think
That was MSR.
wise it was an MSR. I think we perhaps tied for first place in piping with Fife Constabulary.
Okay.
Now those people who are into the record books, we were close. It was either first or second or tied in piping.
Ah.
Drumming didn't do quite so well, so I think we might have finished third or something. We qualified.
You get through.
We got into the final.
And then what happened?
Well, we played really well.
Aye.
What we really wanted to do was let our medley be heard.
Aye.
I think we did a really nice medley.
Yes.
We put a lot of work into that musically
Uh-huh.
and trying to create something that would be memorable, as everybody does, I suppose. But
Yes.
we wanted it to be heard, and you know, had we not qualified, we would have gone and played outside the beer tent or something, just to let it be heard. You know?
Aye. Aye.
But yeah, so I think we, you know, the recordings are there and the DVDs are there for people to look at it. And
I think you
I
get
think
ninth or
Pipe-
something, did you
we
know?
finished, I think we finished 10th out of 12 or something.
Aye.
We actually
Still
we
very
had a top
creditable.
6th placing an ensemble,
Aye.
which was quite
Uh-huh.
something, I guess, to sort of point to that.
Aye.
I think the piping, I was very pleased with it. I still, looking back on it, I could look back and say, well, that was a very good effort, you know.
Aye.
And it added something to the Worlds that year, I think, you know. I think
Of course
it
it
added
did.
a lot of interest. It was something different.
Because people were, should I dare say, slightly bored with the same top 6, the same top 8, getting the same prizes every year. And this was a wee whiff of something fresh, a potential for an upset, or even a fresh listen.
Yeah.
And achieved that.
I mean, the thing about that as well, you know, it was easier for the pipers.
Aye.
The drummers had the hard part of that.
Aye.
You know, and I know that, you know, they've some sort of maybe they've come in for a little bit of flack about, you know, their side of things, but they actually didn't get all the tunes. The tunes didn't get settled until like July. You know, and drummers, as you know, right, they're on scores and meetings.
They usually need a full winter.
And you know, and for them to core together, you
Uh-huh.
know, they probably would have needed much more time. So they actually did a fantastic job with the time that was available to them. And you know, I know that they would like to have another shot at it and probably have a year's notice on the tunes, you know.
Well, it's out there, possibly another time in the future, eh?
Yeah, well, it was great. I mean, going right back to the start, it was basically saying, do you miss the thrill of actually getting out there and playing? And we did, and so we found a way to get out there and play without, you know, recognising everybody's busy life all the rest of the time. And this was an opportunity for
Well, it takes folk by. It's your hobby and it's a pleasure, and really that's what piping should all be about.
Exactly.
Even if, instead of this cutthroat business.
Really. Why, if you want to play, go and play.
Aye, exactly. And so I've dragged away all the distance forward, fast forward from the Glenfiddich, because I knew there was some connection there. And you won the Pipers'Persuasion event there at 8 times, didn't you?
Yes, that's
in the Glenfiddich.
That's for me. I'm really pleased with that. It's a record.
And the Bratach Gone 5 times.
Won that 5 times as well.
Did you enjoy the Bratach Gone?
Yes, I've always enjoyed going to London.
Yeah.
And you know, when I think back over it, I've kind of done quite well at London over the years. I've won, you know, the Bratach you mentioned 5 times. I've got the Open Pipers'Persuasion 9 times.
Okay.
And the overall 7 times, which I think is a record. I've won the former winners there 4 times, which I did on the trot, actually, which was a surprise even to me, you know, because I was like, is that 4? But part of that, I think, as well, I was thinking back about my involvement with the pipe bands, and how full on that is through the summertime.
Of course it is.
I think sometimes it would take me a month or 2 to get into my stride again with just the solo side of things. And maybe that was part of the reason why London became, you know, some place that I actually did quite well at, because I was a little bit freer of the pipe band commitment at that time.
So the yoke was off an excellent.
So a wee bit, you know, so I've always enjoyed going down to London and the atmosphere there, and you know, so
and I want, again, worthy of mention, and I've got a full page here. I'm refusing to write around the whole thing because it's a matter of public record. I've won everything umpteen times. Just a last mention maybe of prizes is a silver chanter at up at Dunvegan, 6 times.
yes,
I obviously enjoyed that.
I've thoroughly enjoyed that, and to win it for the 6th time is a huge thing for me, because Hugh McCallum had this record of winning the silver chanter 6 times, which was, you know, if you get to 4 or 5, you think, can I ever emulate his achievement, and so to win it for the 6th was, you know, a major landmark for myself. So
I spoke to Ian McFadden about this particular event, and he absolutely loved it. He hasn't missed one since it started.
Yeah, Ian's always
he's always there, and he always enjoyed playing in it. And it's a full house, the audience there. I understand the tickets are hard to come by when the event comes round. But I think it's another one of these places that you love playing because of the ambience of the room that you're actually playing in. Perhaps you want to comment on that?
Yeah, well, yes, for me, because the Dunvegan Castle is the home of the Clan MacLeod, so you know, for me it's, you know, something special to play the Clan Castle, you know, and of course the whole McCrimmon connection and the history that, you know, that has attached to it as well.
Yes.
And so there's a great ambience about the silver chanter and playing in the drawing room of the castle. So just even to be invited there is a huge...
Maybe even halfway through Pipers'Persuasion you would get the notion that in a previous life you were a chief.
So I remember
Parents
actually-
do, no, seriously though, when you're halfway through a tune like that, playing in these types of atmospheres,
Yeah.
as against playing pipes in a scheme in Glasgow, you know, there's a wonderful feeling about the whole atmosphere.
Well, there is.
It brings out the music, does it
I
not?
think so. I mean, I think you obviously, whenever you're playing a Pibroch, you want to think a little bit about the story attached to it, if you
Yes.
can, or the people who have been commemorated, or something to try and just evoke the feel of the tune.
Yes.
And I think in Dunvegan Castle, if you don't get inspiration to do that there, then you're unlikely to get it anywhere. You know,
Aye.
you know, you can look across the room, see the fairy flag flying.
Yes.
You know, hanging on the wall, and
Aye.
you know, you can see the references to the McCrimmons and the clan chiefs.
And
You
the
know.
drinking horns there as well.
Exactly. So it's a special place to play. It's a great privilege to play there. I think, you know, just to be invited there is great, and you know, you're right up against the audience, and you know, so.
And you would commend it to anybody listening to pay a visit there.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's a relatively tight space, so if people want to get along there, they should.
Book it for 2 years.
Exactly, but
It's
it's a great experience, and you know, I think that you know, the other thing worth mentioning here, it's quite a difficult place to play in because of the actual atmosphere.
right.
I'm not talking about the
ambience.
I'm talking about the moisture in the air.
Is that right? Aye.
Because it's right on the loch there. You
Of
know.
course it is. I locked in
Quite a
Vegan.
damp
Aye.
atmosphere,
Aye.
and it's notoriously difficult to get through a tune there with your pipes and tune. You know,
Aye.
it's kind of been the downfall of many of our piper over the years there. But it's,
So
it's
a big test on the instrument.
It's a test on the instrument. I
Aye.
don't know whether it's, you know, you've got you know, it can be quite hot because you are with the audience very close up.
Of course, you get a lot of humidity feeding through from and it's in the summer.
That's right.
And July is it July?
It's in August.
August,
Usually
the beginning of
first
August.
week in August.
Aye, where you've got that sort of dampness up there anyway, and then the heat and everything else. Aye, tremendous. So I think we'll just draw a line under it. You've won everything several times, and that's wonderful. When did you come into the pipe band scene, the Scottish Power? Did you, first of all, before that, did you play with any other pipe bands?
Yeah. Well, my very first pipe band was the Glasgow Schools pipe band, which going back to my earlier comments. Going to school in Glasgow, got to know some boys that were involved in the College of Piping and the Glasgow Schools pipe band. So that was a couple of years there. You know, that would be my very first pipe band, and from there, through my early sort of piping competitions, got to know some of the guys in the Red Hackle pipe band, and I was aware of the Red Hackle pipe band because the old Hepburn and Ross building where they practiced from was in Otago Street.
Of course it was.
Which was across the road from the College of Piping.
Yeah.
And there was Neil Dickey. I'd heard of Neil, who's since emigrated out to Canada, but Neil used to go to the college, and he had been in the Red Hackle band. Kevin Moffat, who subsequently went to Strathclyde Police Pipe Band, was doing well in the solo piping at the junior level. And as was Ian Plunkett, who eventually became
Pipe Major
of the Strathclyde
Police. Yeah.
And these guys were around the College of Piping, but also involved in the Red Hackle pipe band. So I got myself along there, and that was my first grade 1 pipe band.
Right.
And at the time it was Malcolm Mackenzie was the pipe major.
Okay.
John Weatherston, who had had a lot of success in the band, he'd retired maybe a few years earlier.
And Malcolm.
But the band at that time was one of the top grade 1 bands. They were featuring in the prize lists at the grade 1. And, so I was with them for a few years, and then through other friendships, and again, just seeing some of the pipers that were involved, I got interested in the British Caledonian Airways.
BCAL, yes.
So I'd become friendly, as I mentioned, with Roddy MacLeod and guys like that, and who were in the BCAL band, and I knew that MacDonald and Alan MacDonald and other pipers like Dr. Angus and a good number of other pipers that were highly regarded were in the band, had been in the band, and I just thought it would be a good move to try there. And so I went along, and
pipe major at that time?
Harry McNulty was the pipe major.
Yes.
And the band, it was an interesting band to be in. It was a great band to be in because you had a lot of experienced characters.
Yes.
Characters in the real sense of the word, a great mix of people. And because of the nature of the band sponsored by the airline, you would have lots of opportunities to go abroad and play pipes abroad and little trips. And trips are great for the camaraderie in a pipe band.
Of course.
And so you always had guys with stories and fun, and of course that's what you want to be around.
Of course, it was British Caledonian Airways, and that was the whole point. You publicised the airline, so you went abroad with them.
Absolutely.
And you played at various places.
Any
particular notable experiences there?
Well, lots. I remember the first week in the band being asked if I could go to Rio de Janeiro. Unfortunately I couldn't, but I remember being thinking, this is fantastic, 1 week in the band. But I could have had lots more experience, but I was actually a school teacher by that point in time. And when you're a school teacher, you shouldn't really be taking any holidays during the school term time. But it was a number of times. I remember going to Stone Mountain Highland Games a few times with the band, and a great time there, and was in Houston and several European places. Remember one notable place, went to Genoa. And it was I enjoy football, so we were playing a Sampdoria Juventus match.
Oh my goodness.
And at that time, Graham Souness and Trevor Francis were playing for Sampdoria, and this was like there was some presentation being made to Souness that day, against the pipe band being there. But it was the coldest day I've ever experienced in my entire life. And for absolutely freezing cold in the winter time in Genoa. And the band stood on the pitch. We'd sat at the stadium, until half time, and then at half time this presentation was to be made. We had to go on, and when the band tried to strike up, nobody could blow their pipes because all their lips had frozen. The only person that could get any sound out of the pipes was Joe Wilson, who was in the back. And so there was a whole entire pipe band. You could hear the drums and maybe 2 sets of pipes and drones and all kinds of it was horrendous. But and then we had the pleasure of marching off around the track and being pelted with oranges by the Juventus fans, hit the feather bonnets. So that was an experience.
Not a great playing experience.
It wasn't the finest ever, put it that way. It was one of these things that you always remember,
Did you meet Graham Souness?
No, sadly not. No.
Okay. That pleasure was denied, So that was BCAL. BCAL won quite a few prizes, of course.
It did. Harry McNulty, when I joined the band, there was actually 2 BCAL bands. Almost 3 in a way. Because you had BCAL Renfrew, which had been there for some time. Ian MacLeod had gone from Edinburgh Police. I mentioned the BCAL Renfrew band.
And the Renfrew band was Tommy Anderson's band before that.
That's right. So you had the BCAL Renfrew band, which then went on to become Babcock Renfrew pipe band. And then you had the BCAL, what they referred to initially as the BCAL Gatwick band. But when I joined the band, there was a corps of pipers and some drummers based in Gatwick,
Mm-hmm.
and there was it's same in Glasgow.
Right.
So the band that Harry was in charge of was on two sites, if you like.
Aye.
And we used to fly down every Sunday to Gatwick for practices in Gatwick,
Goodness sake.
and we'd have practices through the week in Glasgow.
Aye.
And through Harry's time, through recruiting and whatnot, the band became much more Glasgow focused.
Right.
And so that sort of practice of flying to Gatwick
Aye.
sort of diminished
Right.
as time went on, and the band became, you know, a stronger competing band at grade 1 level, if you like. You know.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah, won the prizes, and then of course in 1989 British Caledonian Airways were taken over by British Airways, who already had their own pipe band, and they didn't require the B-Cal pipe band any longer, so that brought that era to an end.
Just.
But the
that's
unit
what
stayed
happened,
together, the
Ah.
major and the band, and you know, our leading drummer was Alec Duthert,
Uh-huh.
great Alec Duthert, and we had a great band.
Uh-huh.
So it was just a matter of finding a new sponsor, and the new sponsor was Scottish Power.
So that's how it developed.
That was,
Aye.
it was just a change of sponsorship. It wasn't a
Yeah,
change of
yeah.
band or a
Aye.
new band,
Uh-huh.
or the band disintegrated and went
No,
away. Or
no.
It was the same band.
Thanks.
It
Right,
became,
so that-
initially it was called the Power of Scotland Pipe Band,
Uh-huh.
and competed under that, because that was their slogan at the time.
Right.
The company's slogan was Power of Scotland.
Uh-huh.
And then it became Scottish Power, you know.
Right.
So at that time, Harry took the band on to winning a couple of the championships, and
Right.
the great band, maybe the greatest band of all time, Strathclyde Police Pipe Band at that time,
Aye.
under Ian McClellan,
Aye.
was the band to beat.
Uh-huh.
And we were getting close, we were running them close.
Aye.
I remember one year I think we went to Cowell to decide the champion of champions, maybe in one of Harry's final years. They'd won 2 championships,
Yeah.
and the police had won 2. And of course, they beat us, you know.
Aye.
But we had a young band, a good young band,
Aye.
and you know, it took something to run the police pipe band close at any point
Of
in
course.
time.
Aye. Especially under Ian McClellan's band.
Absolutely. I mean, they were practically unbeatable at the time, so
Aye.
I'm sure. Right?
It's wonderful music too. So when did you take it over?
Well, when Harry retired as pipe major, I would say in 1992,
Mm-hmm.
and at that time I was offered to take the band on. And I didn't feel that I really wanted to do it at that time. You know, my aspirations kind of firmly set on the solo
Aye.
piping scene at that time.
Yes.
And I just, you know, I wasn't sure that it was the right time for me.
Uh-huh.
So the band looked around externally, and eventually Hugh McInnes became the pipe major of the band,
Yes.
which I think Hugh did 3 years.
Aye.
And by the end of that 3 years, you know, things changed, and Hugh left the band.
Aye.
And then it was offered to me again. And
Aye.
at that point in time, I thought, okay, I'll give it a bash. So it was in 1995.
1995.
I took the band on as pipe major,
Aye.
and
So,
that was the
and
first year.
so how did you go about progressing the quality of playing? Wow.
Well, I mean, I was fortunate again, I was inheriting a very good pipe corps.
Uh-huh.
The leading drummer at that time had been appointed by Hugh McInnes. That was John Scullion,
Uh-huh.
who in his own right is a fantastic drummer.
World champion drummer.
4 times
Mhm.
world solo champion, I think John
Yeah.
was. And, yeah, so John, you know, could work a drum corps,
Aye.
and you know, I had a good pipe corps. Basically, obviously, I was just, you know, trying to strengthen the pipe corps wherever I could, and
Mm-hmm.
if I ever was aware of a talented,
A good player.
strong player for
Aye.
the band,
Aye.
you know, I would obviously try and encourage them along. And
Aye.
over the piece, I don't think, you know, ever struggled. We always had a good, healthy number in the pipe.
And you were never out the prize list, really.
No.
You were always up there.
Well, we were pretty much always in the prize list
Uh-huh.
over the entire
10
10
years.
years that it's been.
Yes.
There was a couple of times, and if you drop out the top 6, you know, it's a huge gloom
Oh my
descends
goodness,
over the band.
Oh dear, dear, dear.
You know,
Aye,
you know, the
There was
band-
only 2 prizes to worry about, first and sixth.
Well, that's it, you know, so
Aye.
it was very difficult. I mean, in that top 6 it's very difficult.
Aye.
You know, we frequently inhabited the space between 3rd and 5th, and, you know, 6th.
But I remember
finally-
Plunkett had the band, and then Jimmy Work improved the police band. But the Scottish Power was always a band to beat as far as we were concerned before we started to talk about beating anybody else. There was much consternation all round when your band kept on popping up in front of us, you know, on the prize list, and we were invariably getting the 6th where you were getting the 4th and whatever, you know.
Yeah, we gradually got stronger,
Aye.
and you know, like we finally did win a couple of championships.
Yes.
And I thought, oh, that's it, we've made it.
Aye.
It wasn't as simple as that, you know.
Never is.
You know,
Especially with very, very high standard
Yeah.
of pipe bands.
you know, exactly. And you know, I think that looking back at that time, you know, I mean, there are things that you think, well, we could have. You know, you've got to work with your leading drummer to improve the ensemble of the band, and the output from the drum corps is something that you know, it's a pipe major. It's difficult to affect the output of the drum corps.
It is.
And, you know, so I suppose you know, that is a difficult thing to manage.
It is because you've got the mindset of the drummers who want to do their own thing. A lot of them do, over a generalisation here. And you've got the pipe major who's maybe just not 100% off exactly what the drummer should be doing or whatever, and sort of bends to the will of the leading drummer on a lot of occasions, and people are going their own way. The really fortunate ones are the ones that have the conversations, and I spoke to Matheson about this in his interview, and he was fortunate that he had Kilpatrick, and the two of them spoke to one another, and I think that's where they achieved their success many a time in the prize list above Scottish Power and Strathclyde, was simply because their ensemble prizes were getting them there.
Yes, I mean, the ensemble became a huge part of how the scoring of pipe bands.
Yes.
And you know, we were doing very well piping wise, and we were doing, you know, fairly well ensemble wise.
As Joe Noble spoke in his interview about drumming judges, there's quite a narrow platform of drumming judges out there, and if you're not recognised by that narrow platform, that's me saying that, not you saying that, then there's a difficulty for those that are not recognised to break through into that scene. Same way as you had a difficulty probably initially breaking through into the solo piping scene because of the well recognised names that were on the scene at that time. And that always seems to be the problem with piping and pipe bands, doesn't it?
Well, it does. I mean, you know, you do get the feeling that you have to play exceptionally well sometimes to break into that, you know, top 6, and once you're in the top 6 to break into the top 3. Because, you know, with the best all in the world, and you know, it's maybe not deliberate, but some judges will be aware of pipe band's track record, and you know,
it's an easy option. That's my comment.
And I don't mean to be demeaning
to
pipe band, because I've tried judging pipe bands myself. I've done it, and it's not an easy job.
No, it isn't.
It's a very difficult task.
Especially when they're the size they are now too.
Yeah, and you know, to this day, I wouldn't willingly put myself out there to judge pipe bands because it is difficult.
Aye.
You know, and you hear one thing on one side of a band that you might not hear on the other side.
Yeah.
And you know, I've been on the receiving end of that as a pipe major, and
But you enjoyed it.
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And
It's only when I look back I realise
Aye.
just how much effort it was at the time.
aye,
It was
aye.
a huge effort, a huge commitment, you know. It was
And just
fantastic.
before we move on to the Piping Centre, a comment, your experience in teaching as a professional teacher of maths, your experience in solo piping, all the success you had, obviously, and the success with pipe bands, all gelled together when you applied for the position in the National Piping Centre. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, well, I was aware that obviously there was going to be a piping centre. You know, I knew about the efforts of the Piping Trust at the time to refurbish and create the building we're in just now. And so I was watching it quite keenly, the developments, and I was kind of kept in the loop a little bit about it by Andrew McNeill at the time, I think he had been involved in instigating the idea with some of the people in the Piping Trust at the time. And Andrew was an old piping adjudicator, even a pupil of Robert Reid. He was a bit of a character, Andrew, and you know, so he told me about the project, if you like, so that you know I was interested. By that point, I'd actually taught maths for about 13 years. And I was quite happily doing what I was doing. I was quite enjoying it. You know, I was in quite a good position where I was. But I thought there was a challenge about the potential of, you know, coming here to try this job. So I did apply for it, and you know, I remember, you know, the selection process was quite interesting for me at the time. And initially met with a recruitment consultant who came out and gave me a private interview, and then that progressed on to another couple of interviews, and the final interview was basically to the Piping Trust, as it was at that time, which included, you know, Seamus McNeill and people like Sandy Grant Gordon and other people like that, the people who formed the trust at the time. And you had to present a vision for how you know you would see the future of piping in the Piping Centre, and you know, so I gave my presentation and was fortunate enough to be offered the position. And I remember at the time thinking, well, I'm in a very safe job in teaching. You know, it's a very secure position. Kind of taking a leap into the unknown in a sense.
Absolutely.
Piping Centre. But I thought it was a leap I was ready to make, because I thought, well, it was an exciting challenge. It was a huge privilege to get the opportunity in the first place.
Yes.
And, you know, an experience that, you know, has been extremely valuable. But you do have the security of knowing, well, I could revert back to teaching again if it doesn't work out. You know, worst case scenario. So that was my kind of thought process at the time. You know, I thought, well, the opportunity presented the possibility of a huge amount of variety in my life, and the opportunity to spend my life working on what was my passion, which is piping and music. You know, so that was where I was at that time.
So how did you go about when you arrived here? I take it you were only looking after the piping side. There's other people looking after the admin side of the project here. So you'd be recruiting teachers?
Yes, well, I mean, I think, you know, it would be silly not to mention that the original you know, thought process about this place was it would be a new home for the College of Piping. Now, it didn't happen, and we don't want necessarily to talk a lot about that and divert the interview from that. But that was originally the plan. So, you know, to put it in correct historical context, you know, I think you have to mention that, because when I started here, we already had a director of administration who had been appointed prior to me, and part of his job at that time was seeing the building to completion and, you know, all of that aspect, appointing the bookkeeping staff and you know, some other front of house staff and things like that.
Yeah.
And then I came in, I was appointed as director of piping.
Uh-huh.
Now, the reason I mentioned the College of Piping is that, to put it in context,
Yes.
is that if things had gone ahead as planned, there would have been a student base, there would have been shop and a shop business, there would have been all of the other things that you might have expected.
Yes.
But basically on day one there was nothing. There were no students, there was no shop, there was no tutor book,
Okay.
no, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a complete start from zero, if you like.
Right.
And I think that's important to know that, you know,
Okay.
so that when you look at where it was and where it is now,
Yes.
you know, it's important to realise that. So as part of that whole arrangement at that time, Pipe Major Angus MacDonald, formerly Scots Guards, had agreed to come to the piping centre. And so when day one we opened for business, there was myself and Angus as the piping staff,
Okay.
as it was. And then it just, bit by bit, we clawed our way up, and we put students in, and people coming into the shop, and
Right.
we made plans to write our own tutor book, and we used as many of our connections as we could to establish the business, and bit by bit.
And you establish a magazine eventually?
We did, fairly quickly. Initially it was a newsletter called Notes. It was
Right.
8 pages, and you know, that came about. Obviously there was a will here to do it, use it as a kind of information piece about the centre, but I had done a recital tour of New Zealand and had met a journalist out there called Mike Patterson.
Right.
As it turned out, fairly shortly after the centre opened, Mike emigrated to Scotland, and so we got in tow with Mike and used him doesn't sound nice to say it, but
No.
he became the person who would help put the magazine together.
Yes.
And you know, when I say help, you know, until he worked his way into the world of piping, but very quickly after, you know, a year or so,
You got a sense of the scene then?
he had a sense of the scene,
Yeah.
and the magazine grew.
Uh-huh.
And you know, my part of it was as editor, writing the editorial, and just trying to oversee the balance
Yes.
of things and input into where there might be interesting stories,
Yes.
bits of news,
Uh-huh.
and that's how it developed.
Uh-huh.
And so it was kind of like everything just grew. You know, our connection with the Academy of Music and Drama was a vital connection.
How did that come about?
Well, it came about because they were offering already, I'm pretty sure, or were just starting to offer a BA in Scottish music.
Mm-hmm.
And that allowed the opportunity for pipers to take this degree in Scottish music with piping as their principal instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And Alan MacDonald was
Uh-huh.
providing some teaching there, and so obviously the physical locality to the piping centre, and also one of the board members, Lady Una Ivory, was on the board of governors of RSMD.
Uh-huh.
So there's a connection there between our board and the board of governors at RSMD.
Uh-huh.
And that opened up the possibilities for me to talk to the director of music at the RSMD at the time, who was Rita McAllister was her name.
Okay.
And just to take a look at what the piping input to the Scottish music degree was, and also to take a look at how it might develop.
Uh-huh.
And Rita was fantastic, and I can distinctly remember her saying to me, well, if we wanted a specialist piping degree, we needed a blank page what would you put down on it?
Ah,
And
good.
so she opened up the negotiation to move towards another degree.
Uh-huh.
It was a BA Scottish Music with a specialism in piping,
Uh-huh.
which is what is now offered alongside the broader BA Scottish Music. So that strengthened our position because all of the pipers that were going to the academy now were being channelled through the piping centre.
Uh-huh.
And as well as pipes as principal instrument,
Mm-hmm.
we created new courses in piping repertoire and history and bagpipe technology, and it sort of basically filled a bigger chunk of this degree course, and that's been in place for about the past 10 years now.
And it's been popular, numbers wise?
It's been very popular. The difficulty with it is that there is only a restricted number of places. It's to do with the funding that the Academy receive from the Scottish Higher Education Funding Council.
Yeah.
They can only give something like a dozen places a year to Scottish music, which would include fiddle, accordion, Gaelic singing. And annually we get about 4 or 5 pipers out of the 12 or so that the whole of Scottish music gets.
And a good success rate in passing and getting a
Oh,
BA.
tremendous. I mean, we also, as well as home students, we've had
Yeah.
overseas students who they can take as many overseas students as are interested in coming.
Aye, because there's not the same problems about
They
funding.
pay their own fees.
Aye, exactly.
And so we've had students from Australia, Japan, America, Germany. Germany doesn't count, that's EU, but we've had overseas students. We normally have, over the 4 years of the course, somewhere between 15 and 20 students. And in recent years we've had a number of them graduating with honours degrees, and several now with first class honours, which is tremendous to get that recognition from the Academy of Music and Drama, which is Scotland's conservatoire, specialist institution for music teaching, to bestow on some of these pipers first class honours degrees has been a huge seal of approval, I think, for the collaboration.
That's tremendous. What do they, have you got any idea what these people go on and do after degrees?
Yeah, I mean, we keep track of all of the graduates, and as do the Academy, and a good number of them are going on to take up teaching positions.
Yes.
And that could be either as piping teachers with the local authorities, but some of them actually as music teachers, and quite a number of them excelling in the world of performance. Some of them going into the world of TV and media and things like that. I mean, I've always thought people graduate from universities and institutions with all kinds of qualifications. It doesn't always matter what kind of qualification it is to the employer. It's the fact that they've got someone who
they've applied themselves.
Has applied themselves and has obviously
achieved
an
success.
intelligence and a commitment and a drive.
Yeah.
And I'd see no reason why piping graduates, who after all are music graduates, pipers are musicians.
Yes.
Sometimes people forget that. Why they
especially at that level.
Yeah. They should be able to take their place in the world of employment in the same way as any music graduate does.
Yeah.
Whether it's teaching, classroom teaching, the world of media, whatever, performance. And happily we can say at this point in time, the majority of them are gainfully employed, so it's been quite successful.
So that's it, and you have the magazine, the tutor book for your students, and you also, what part have you at the Piping Centre played with the National Youth Pipe Band of Scotland?
Well, we started the National Youth Pipe Band in Scotland.
Right.
That came about again in the early years of the centre, in trying to, make the place work, if you like.
Right.
We applied, I remember creating this application to the National Lottery, as it was at the time, for a national schools piping project. And it was a huge application. you know, basically what it involved was offering 3-day courses to kids from the country who were receiving piping tuition at school. So, you know, like Highland Region at that time, I think they had 11 piping teachers. You had people working in Perthshire and Dundee and, you know...
For example, Ian Duncan's
Duncan,
teaching,
exactly.
yeah, up there.
People like Ian Duncan and Gordon Rogers and, you know, going around schools in their areas.
Yes.
So we knew there was lots of kids getting piping tuition, but we also knew that they might only get half an hour with their instructor in the course of a week. And a lot, you know, from our research, talking to these instructors, you know, they agreed that they could maybe be inspired by coming to the Piping Centre and learning about aspects of piping that they wouldn't get to in half an hour's lesson.
Right.
So we made up these courses that, you know, they'd learn about reed making, or they would learn how to process a tune using bagpipe music software, or they'd learn, you know, a specialist class on tuning, manipulating reeds, or tuning drones, or, you know, so we weren't trying to do the teacher's job in terms of teaching them the technique. We were trying to teach them other things that surrounded piping.
Complementing the teaching.
Complemented what they were doing. And also give them the opportunity to sit at that time, as it was, the Institute of Piping exams. So we go back with some tangible award from their time. So that application to the lottery at that time, I can remember, was a £244,000 bid. And we were successful. Well, the project was for £244,000. Whenever you get these awards as well, I think a lot of people don't realise you have to raise partnership funding or put in partnership funding, so we had to be quite clever about how basically the award was 180,000, we had to find 64,000 to make it work, which we did through various means like in-kind funding and other sources. So we made it work anyway, we got it to work, and Greg Wilson from New Zealand was employed as the coordinator of that project.
Good guy, Greg.
Fantastic, absolutely superb person, very organised.
Great player, and
fantastic
great
player.
all-round player.
You know, you could depend on him for anything. So at that time in our existence, to get Greg on board to manage and run, which is a very important project, to run for 3 years was a real great step forward. So he applied himself 150% as he does to everything, and he made it work, and we got kids coming from all over the country. But the project had a shelf life of 3 years, so then you think, well, what are we going to do now? So you have to go back. If you go back to the lottery at that time, you couldn't go back to them and ask for the same thing again. You had to get a new incarnation of the project. So we went back to them with the idea for a National Youth Pipe Band of Scotland. So that our national outreach was continuing. And we would be running courses to audition kids, to then filter them through to rehearsal weekends, filter them into a band that would perform. And so the connection, you see how one transformed into the other.
And they did a wonderful outing at the Celtic Connections this year.
Well, the band has improved. I mean, Paul Warren was the first director of the National Pipe Band. We took Paul. He had previously been through his pipe majors course in the army and in the Argylls, and he did a very good job. I mean, he understood the concept that the band was to be a concert band, a non-competing band. Because we didn't want people who were sending their kids to think that we were going to be grabbing them and then going off and competing against them. So
it was more a teaching.
It was a teaching thing. It's an inspirational thing. So that's one of the biggest things that I would say. So Paul did it for a few years. Now Alistair McLaren is the director, and he's taken it on, and I think he's done an absolutely wonderful job. Alistair, he'd been pipe major in Western Australia Police, he plays in Field Marshal, so very good pipe band experience. And
he played with Strathclyde Police for a wee while as well before he went across the water.
And he's well versed in arranging music and working with other instruments.
Playing
but-
some very innovative music
Yeah.
as well.
One of the biggest things I think about the National Youth Pipe Band is I think it's inspirational for the kids that are in there.
Aye.
You know, because they're coming and they're mixing with the best pipers and drummers from all over the country. They're making friends with each other.
Aye.
They turn up at competitions, they want to vie against each other. And I feel almost certain that that, as an organisation, has helped raise standards amongst young people.
Well, certainly when you see them on stage, what is notable is the discipline and the presentation
Yeah.
of the whole project on stage, and you can see they've been well schooled, not just in piping but
Yeah.
in actual presentation.
Yeah.
And that was a joy to watch on that particular day just a couple of months ago there.
Yeah. I mean, the project's been fantastic. I mean, they've had, you know, composers come and work with them. They've had people, percussionists from the, you know, the other world of percussion, not pipe band percussion, come and work with them. We've had the American marching band snare drumming champion Jeff Queen.
Aye.
They look him up on YouTube.
Aye.
Come and work with them and show them all kinds of drumming rudiments and tricks.
That'd be terrific.
You know, things like that that are absolutely. We've had people come from Brittany
Aye.
to work with, to teach them Breton music.
Which is very, very
You
interesting.
know, so
Yeah.
so the experiences that they're getting are things that never existed before. Really, I don't think.
Aye.
You know, for young pipers,
Yeah.
you know, to be able to play almost like representing your country at a national organisation and get to meet kids who will be their friends lifelong, I think, isn't it?
Aye, I know.
And I think it's been an absolutely wonderful thing for young pipers and drummers. I mean, piping live has been hugely important to the pipe sector. I think this year might be about the 8th year of piping live.
Okay.
And again, you know, the idea that we thought, well, when you have the World Pipe Band Championships in Glasgow in August, you've got a critical mass of people coming.
Right.
We had events going on. We've ran since the centre opened actually in 1996, lunchtime recitals in the summer leading up to the Worlds every year. So we've had piping events in August all that time. The Lord Todd at Strathclyde University, all at the band stay, they, you know, were putting on their piping and drumming events. And you start to think, well, there's people having a lot of activity, but the other thing which you know, through my own experience and discussions with people like Finlay MacDonald, who works here, and his father Ian, and people like Dougie Pincock, guys who travelled around, we were aware of international piping festivals happening in other countries.
Yes.
So we're talking about international piping festivals, we're talking about festivals that had a range of bagpipes represented, whether it was a mix. You could go and hear people playing Galician music on the gaita. You could hear Breton pipers playing in the beat.
Britain is famous for that, with the Fête de Cornwall and L'Oreal.
Yeah. But Scotland had nowhere. Like, Scotland was. You go around Scotland, all you hear Scottish bagpipes.
Aye.
And there's, which is great.
Aye.
And everything, you know, there's so much of it. You can go to Highland Games every day of the week throughout the summer, and pipe bands, solo piping. But there would seem to be a gap in the market that there's unbelievably good performers from other piping traditions. That there seemed to be an opportunity to create an international piping festival and marry that up to the critical mass of what was going on in Glasgow in August.
Right.
And that's where it started from. And again, with all these things, you have a great idea. The next thing you've got to turn around and say, well, how are we going to get the money to put it together? Which has been a huge challenge of the whole thing. But fortunately, it's kind of gone from strength to strength. And you know, even in these difficult times just now with recessions and all that, we're at least securing our funding for the next little while, so, or for this year anyway. So.
Well, Glasgow and the visitors to Glasgow are very well entertained through World's Week, if you like.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should be.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think people really appreciate the offering that's there now.
And even in straitened circumstances, that's perhaps all the more reason for a smile, eh?
Exactly,
Aye.
exactly. I mean, it's It has to this point been a success story, and so we hope it will continue that. So.
And you were recognised with such a success in everything you've done, Roddy. You were awarded the MBE. What year was that?
I think it was 2003.
3.
Was it?
2003.
I was going to say
Aye. And where did you go for that?
well, I went to Buckingham Palace,
Uh-huh.
and obviously that was a bolt from the blue, actually getting the news that was being offered to me, and obviously, fantastic news that
Yeah.
it was a real surprise, I have to say.
And who did you get to see there?
The Queen.
The Queen.
Yeah. So,
Wonderful.
but it was quite
Aye.
nice because
Aye.
the Queen's piper at that time was Jimmy Stout, who I knew.
Right.
And Jimmy was in duty that day, and we
Aye.
was able to sort of have a little chat and everything before it. So
Aye.
it's nice to see a familiar face there. But yeah, I went down with my wife Margaret, and took my mum and father down. So it was a kind of proud moment, I guess, for
Quite
us
sure.
all in the family, and a day that you won't forget, I guess.
Well, you've worked hard for all your life, both in your working life, and you applied yourself. Kenny MacLeod went on record in Pipeline once and saying that you were the best example of a piper to a young person.
Did he?
Aye.
Well, that's
So I
great.
think we'll finish on that note,
That's great.
and thanks very much for the interview for Pipers'Persuasion, and I hope everybody's enjoyed it the way that we have today.
Okay, thanks.